Thank you very much. Thank you, Will, for the invitation, and everybody of you who are here to attend this scientific meeting. I think it is really important that you guys are getting involved into all these topics because you're the ones who are going to make the changes here in the watershed. So I'm going to talk to you today. I apologize, my English, I'm going to get a little bit sometimes, but I want to tell you today about a topic that is a bit complex because it involves complicated health issues, but I think that we should all be aware of this to take the proper measures. So today I'm going to talk to you about arsenic in water sources in Panajachel, Santa Catarina, and San Antonio, Palopó. So as Eliska mentioned before, arsenic is an element that is naturally found in concentrations in different parts of the world. It's a very widespread problem. It doesn't have any smell, it doesn't have any taste, so you don't know if it's present in the water because you cannot taste it. It is found in inorganic forms, mainly in the water and the soil, and also in organic forms in plants and animals. That's how they uptake their inorganic forms and they metabolize it and store it in their organisms. The inorganic form is more toxic than the organic form. And the use of contaminated water with arsenic for human consumption, food, and irrigation represents a break risk for the population. The immediate actions that you have to take in the communities that are affected by this problem is, well, it sounds very logical, but it's very complex, is to provide a safe source of water. As Eliska mentioned, there are certain limits that are recommended by the World Health Organization, and we have to keep in mind this number. I'm telling you, it's 10 ppbs, which is the equivalent of 10 micrograms per liter. And that is the limit that is recommended for human consumption. So what are the impacts of consumption of arsenic in the human body? It affects different systems. For example, there is impaired intellectual function, impaired motor function, neuropathy. It also affects the cardiovascular system. It causes coronary disease, hypertension, heart attacks. It also affects the renal system, causing kidney cancer and bladder cancer, skin lesions, skin cancer, affects the endocrine system, causing diabetes, impaired glucose tolerance, the respiratory system. It also causes liver cancer. And in children who are exposed to this, they have an increased cancer risk as adults, increased infant mortality, neurological impairment, and reduced birth weight. So as you can see, it is a very complex problem because it affects many systems of the body. And the way that arsenic acts is that it disrupts cell respiration, and literally your cells start to die, and the tissue as well. So when you have like big exposures to this is a very fast process, but when you have small exposures to this, the process is more slow. So this is the estimated risk of arsenic in drinking water around the world. And you can see that it's a very widespread problem. And as you can see in Guatemala, there is very little data about it. And because of this, there have not been really any measures or any studies about it because we don't really have a very good understanding of what's going on. Nonetheless, there have been a couple of studies done in Guatemala in which they have analyzed different metals in water sources. And there are different studies from Guatemala, Izabal, Jutiapa, San Marcos. And there are particularly two studies that were done in Atitlán. One in 2016, in which they were assessing arsenic and mercury. And the other one done in 2013, in which they were assessing arsenic presence in groundwater. And this was done for surface water in Lake Atitlán. So we do have these two studies for the watershed. The Geólogos del Mundo, which is an NGO, is a Spanish NGO, they did this very complex sampling exercise in which they assessed the arsenic concentration in groundwater in all the watershed. So you can see all these spots where they took the samples and they analyzed the data. So given the volcanic origin of the watershed, there are large deposits of arsenic underground, which are dissolved into the water from the springs and the lake. And as you can see here in the map, the areas that are in green are areas that have very low arsenic in their underground water sources. But for example, Panajachel, Santa Catarina Palopó, San Antonio Palopó, and San Andrés en Metabaj, they are areas with very high risk of arsenic contamination. So it's a very specific area in the lake that has the largest problem. And these are the 4 municipalities that have the problem. Also, this study done by USAC, they also tested the lake water in different points of the year during 2014. And they found that all these sites had concentrations above the limit that WHO recommends. And apparently there are changes throughout the year. Sometimes the concentrations are higher and sometimes they are lower. But in general, the concentrations are pretty high and they are above the limits. And this is for lake water. And we have to take this into consideration because even though these municipalities don't have arsenic in their water sources, in their underground water, they are taking water from the lake for human consumption. And they are also taking arsenic, but from another source, which is the lake. So, we were kind of worried about this problem, so we decided that jointly with AMSCLAE, we were going to conduct a sampling exercise, but not in underground or water sources, but in surface water and water from houses and the municipal wells of Panajachel, Santa Catarina, and San Antonio. So we did this testing in which we took 20 points in houses, rivers, water springs, and municipal tanks in the 3 municipalities, in Panajachel, Santa Catarina, and San Antonio. And you can see in the map the points that we sampled. We did all these assessments. We tested for all these metals. And AMSA, which is the authority that overlooks Lake Atitlán, did the test for us. So we're very thankful for them for this favor. And unfortunately, we didn't find very good results. Panajachel seems to be the municipality with the biggest problems. The San Francisco River has concentrations that go up to 130 ppbs. Remember the 10? So they are like 13 times, above the limit. Also, the stadium well, it's very contaminated. And different points around Panajachel, they also have considerable concentrations of arsenic. San Antonio and Santa Catarina are not as bad as Panajachel, but they are also above the limits. So that is something that we really have to look at as well. So we presented the results to the Commission of Natural Resources and the Water and Sanitation Access. And they requested that we conducted another sampling exercise just to make sure that our results were, correct. So we did concentrate in Panajachel because that's where we saw that the biggest problem was. And we analyzed all these points that you can see here in the map. The results are here as well. I want to explain a little bit more. The points that are in green are the ones that are within the levels recommended. Then as the color gets darker, it means that the concentrations are higher. So we were able to corroborate the information that we got from the previous sampling exercise. And we could see that there were some hot spots, you could tell, in which there were larger concentrations of arsenic, especially here near the lakeshore, for some reason. We really need to get a better understanding on how the water distribution system is organized, because we don't really understand why there is so many differences in different sampling points. Why do we have less concentration here in Santander, but next, a little bit down the street, the concentration goes up? So we really need to have more information about this, and we really need to do more research to figure out what's going on here. We also have to take into consideration that some people have their private wells, and they're taking water from there and not from the municipal system. But this is something that needs to be done jointly with the municipality in order to be able to tackle the problem. This is more or less the same results that I showed you in the graph, but I want to make sure that to point out these 2 points that I didn't show in the map. This is Churrunelas, and this is located more or less around this area. It's outside the map. And apparently this is a source of water that the municipality takes. And you can see that the levels are really low. They are under the limit. So there is something that is going on there. We don't know if they're mixing the water with other contaminated sources. That is something that we still need to understand and look at. To give you a larger perspective of how the arsenic is distributed in the 3 municipalities, you can see that Panajachel has the biggest problem, Santa Catarina and San Antonio. San Antonio, if I'm correct, there are some areas that they get their water from Tecpan, which is not contaminated, and the problem is not so serious as the one that we see in Panajachel. So why do we think that this has increased? And because this was not something that was big, a couple of years ago. We think, and this is our personal hypothesis, that removing the soil and extracting, sand from the waterbed of the river is also making more available this arsenic that is on the soil. Also, we have problems of deforestation and erosion, inadequate agricultural practices. There are more forest fires, and there are more drilling of private wells. So this is making more accessible this arsenic that has been, stored on the ground for many years. Why didn't it affect, the previous generations? We didn't hear anything about this, a couple of decades ago. The soil was not so eroded. We had more forest, and this is a picture that I like. This is how from the year 1900, and you can see it was a lot of forest. This is the river, the San Francisco, just a couple of houses. And now you can see all the erosion that is going on, especially in the San Francisco River area. So the sources were less contaminated, and we didn't have any one of these excavations taking place, in order to remove sand. So the whole process that we are observing at the river are not only affecting the sediments that go into the lake and causing all these problems with the contamination, but they are also removing arsenic that is going straight into the lake as well. So that is another associated problem with these activities. Why don't we have, you don't see all of these cancer cases or any diseases, or the cases that you see, for example, in Bangladesh, where they have all these lesions on the skin? The thing is that the Ministry of Health doesn't have any reports. They don't, in their surveillance system, they don't really take into account these cases or this information there, so they're not really looking at this the way they should. And when you have deaths, they don't really look at what are the causes of death. For example, they say cancer, but that is, you don't know really what are the causes of this cancer. Also, the human body can accumulate small doses of arsenic throughout its lifetime. So the effects are going to be seen probably in a couple of years, because this is a chronic exposure to arsenic that is happening bit by bit. So what are we doing? Right now the university is working jointly with the ETH Zurich. The ETH Zurich, this group of researchers, Dr. Bolisete and Dr. Mesenga, have developed this technology. And they developed these amyloid carbon hybrid membranes that they are done with milk, protein, and carbon. And they developed this membrane that is capable of removing not only arsenic, but a lot of heavy metals and radioactive isotopes. So we sent them a couple of samples from Lake Atitlan. This is the sample from Lake Atitlán, and it corresponds to more or less the concentrations that we have been seeing all this time. And this is a sample that we took from Panajachel, from a house, a faucet. We sent them, these were the initial concentrations of arsenic they found in the samples, and after they passed this water through the membrane, they were able to reduce the concentrations of arsenic to almost nothing. So the membranes are really, 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 really effective and efficient. So they are developing the home, individual, and municipal filters that can be installed at different levels. So we just submitted a project, to IDB, so they can fund the pilot study of implementing this type of technology in communities here in the lake. So this is how the membrane looks like. These are the two researchers that I was mentioning you. So if you want more information about this technology, there is a very nice note. Well, the website, it's a little bit complicated. But since we're going to leave the presentation, you can access the website. We are also doing some efficiency testing with the local filters, UTHA, to see how much arsenic they are able to remove. We're also going to test their efficiency in removing pathogens. We're going to do this with biochemistry microbiology students from UBG and together with AMSA in June 2018. So hopefully we're going to be having a couple of results in a couple of months. We also presented the results to the municipality. We did that twice, and we presented a document with the recommendations to reduce the risk of exposure in Panajachel. The Environmental Education Access from the Commission also prepared a strategy of communication to the population. AMSCLAE advised the municipality in technologies for removing arsenic at the municipal level. And the mayor indicated that he was going to organize a communication strategy to the population in general. And that's what we've done at the political level. So what are the recommendations? We should avoid, I know it's complicated, but of course consuming water that is contaminated, foods and water contaminated with arsenic. And we should avoid also watering crops with this contaminated water. This was a study done by Hugo Villavicencio, and he presented it in the Symposium 2 years ago. He actually measured the amount of copper, manganese, and arsenic in 2 species of crabs in the lakes that are the ones that are fished here, and in Lobina Negra. Lobina Negra and the snails that people eat here. And he did find that these 2 types of crab actually accumulate arsenic, not much the snails or the fish. So if you're going to eat fish, try to do it, clean it inside and try to lower a little bit the consumption of these foods. Use bottled water, purified water, and to prepare foods, which is certified that it removes actually heavy metals, and with a proper, purification and treatment system. And this is really important, that the water that you consume is certified, that they have a proper treatment. What can we do with this water? You can, wash your dishes, wash your clothing, you can bathe yourself, and you can have your personal hygiene. It's not like the optimum thing, but it's something that you can actually do. It is very important to highlight that boiling, chlorinating, and filtering water with like the home-based methods is not going to remove the arsenic. This is really important to know. So we have to take this into consideration. And finally, I would like to end my presentation with the recommendations that WHO give. And they sound pretty easy, but at the end, they are complicated to implement. And we should substitute sources with high concentrations of arsenic above 100 ppbs with underground water sources from wells and safe water sources, like rainwater, for example. Water with low concentrations of water can be used, to cook, like I said, to do your laundry, etc. And we could also, in case we had the possibility, to discriminate the water that has high concentrations with the one that has low concentrations. And we could actually dilute it. If you dilute it with water that has low concentrations, the problem is going to get minimized as well. So if we have a lot of arsenic in our water, we can dilute it. And that could be water that can be used. And the municipality has to install, arsenic removal systems. And that is something that they do have to do. And there are other, a lot of technologies that can do this. But this is something that we have to, request, to the municipality, that they treat the water so that it becomes a safe source of water. So with that, I would like to end my presentation. And I just want to take a couple of minutes to make the announcement of our second symposium of continental waters that is going to take place 9 and 10 of July in the Port Hotel del Lago. So we're going to be sending